To whom it may concern, or to the Twin Peaks boys. I have recently listened to this so-called podcast that you did, pitting each David Lynch movie up against each other. I say, dear sirs, are you mad? You cannot pit art against art. And then to do a bracket like what, it's some sort of basketball game? The madness, my friends, is on you. I was disgusted with everything about this podcast. The way you pit them together? Oh, yes, why don't we just have Firewalk with Me in the same bracket as Blue Velvet? Oh, great idea. I was disgusted by this whole thing. I have never, in all of my years of a David Lynch scholar, been more perturbed, I say, perturbed with your behavior. I shall never tune into your podcast again. Never! Unless next week is really good, I might have to listen to that. Because what am I going to do in the car? I'm driving around. The traffic is horrible. I tune in. I hear the Twin Peaks boys. It's not so bad. But, but this was too far, I say. I say again, too far. Signed, John Thorne.
Who killed Laura Palmer?
I don't remember.
You can have a funeral any old time. You dig a hole, you plant a coffin.
Afraid? I'm gonna turn it upside down!
Don't ruin this, too!
Blackfoot legend. Waking souls that give life to the mind and the body. A dream soul that wanders.
Let's take you home.
Oh. All right, this is Community Rewatch episode 3. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Ben. How are you?
Good. It's been a long time. It's supposed to be a monthly Community Rewatch, but it's been a little longer than that. But we're trying to get back into it. And today we've got a great panel, and we'll start off with John.
Hi, this is John Thorne. I am a co-editor of the Blue Rose magazine. Used to be co-editor of a magazine called Wrapped in Plastic, and I have a book out called The Essential Wrapped in Plastic. So that's me.
Hey, I'm Sam Witt, and I am one of the lead moderators of the Twin Peaks subreddit on reddit.com.
Hello, this is Andy Bentley. Been on the show in the past and worked with Twin Peaks Unwrapped on all their graphics and their icons.
And we thank you for that.
Yes.
You're welcome.
And here are the unseen players.
Hi, I'm Francine the Lucid Dream as Norma Jennings and Catherine Martell.
Hi, I'm BunnyBuxom as Lucy Moran, Shelly Johnson, and the Caretaker.
Hi, I'm MinxArcana as Donna Hayward and Josie Packard.
Hi, I'm Schaefer the Dark Lord as Sheriff Harry Truman, Special Agent Dale Cooper, Parole Officer Wilson Mooney, Doc Hayward, Ed Hurley, Mike Nelson, Benjamin Horn, and Pete Martell.
And we are
the Pink Room Burlesque. So this is Community Rewatch episode 3, the funeral episode. And John, you and I were talking, it is so confusing because I guess everybody has a different interpretation of what episode this is. We do the pilot, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, but I think Netflix does it differently. They might go with pilot being 1, and then you have all the naming conventions, so it is always confusing when we're talking about an episode that we all don't agree on what the numbering system is.
Yeah, I mean, a long time ago, we used to call it episode 4 because we considered the pilot the first episode. But and then we just started using the script numbering, and the script number is episode 1003. So I guess it's the third episode.
Yeah, I double checked a couple times. I'm like, this is the episode we're doing, right?
Yeah. I hope I mentioned that. I said it's a funeral episode. So if we knew it was the funeral
episode, was a great way to do it. Yep.
Yeah.
Just funeral as a keyword.
So this was written by Harley Payton. He was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Writing for a Drama. I think it's a great episode.
Yeah. For people that were watching in real time, the anticipation must have been through the roof after the last episode, right?
We left it off that Cooper wakes up from a dream, calls Harry, and says, I know who killed Laura Palmer. So it's like, all right, the mystery is over. We know who killed Laura Palmer. It doesn't go that way. What about you, John? Back in the day, did you really think that we were going to find out who killed Laura Palmer?
No, I didn't. But I mean, obviously, I remember when it first aired, we were waiting to see what was going to happen because the last thing we'd heard is Cooper say, I know who killed Laura Palmer, and it can wait till morning. I think it was probably the first time I ever felt a slight bit of disappointment in Twin Peaks, only because the first thing Cooper says is, "I forgot." So it seems like a cop-out, you know, that Cooper would forget. But, you know, obviously they couldn't resolve it in that episode, so they had to come up with something. And to Harley Payton's credit, he kind of dances around that and gets the story going pretty fast.
We mentioned on the last Community Rewatch, episode 2 wasn't filmed, and we learned this from Brad Dukes. Episode 2 was filmed between episode 6 and episode 7, so being the last episode of the season. It seems so strange in some ways that they film episode 1, and then right after episode 1, they go to this episode.
Interior, Great Northern Dining Room, day. Dale Cooper at the corner table takes a sip of coffee and orders breakfast from waitress Trudy.
Who killed Laura Palmer? Let me tell you about the dream I had last night. Tibet? No. You were there, Harry, and so were you, Lucy. Do you have a sketch artist? Andy sketches from time to time. Interesting. I dreamed it was Deputy Hawk. Find out if Sarah Palmer has had any disturbing dreams. If she has, there may be important clues in her dreams as well. Clues? My dream is a code waiting to be broken. Break the code, solve the crime.
Break the code, solve the crime. What does the midget stand for?
Just about everything, Lucy.
Cooper's saying how, like, oh yeah, Harry, you were in the dream, and so are you, Lucy. And it's like, I just watched episode 2. There's no Harry or Lucy in the dream.
I thought he was describing some European pilot stuff.
Yeah, that's what he was, but they didn't have the episode done because Lynch didn't film it for weeks on end or so. So they were just going with what they thought was going to be in episode 2.
Yeah, the first time I watched this episode, I had not seen the international pilot yet, and I just assumed it was more Twin Peaks weirdness, so I guess it didn't really faze me.
You know, that's exactly what happened when we first saw it, too. We had no idea that there even was a European ending. So when it first aired, there was all this description of dream content that made absolutely no sense to us because it didn't describe what we had seen. Well, I mean, describe parts, but not, you know, it went into different areas than what we had seen the episode before. But obviously, as you say, they had scripted this episode 3 based on what they knew the European ending material was. They just didn't realize how much they were going to have to edit it down when they got to that later episode, filming wise.
I was just curious, so knowing that we were doing unseen stuff, I went back to the old first DVD release because that gives you that little icon trigger to see some of the script things.
Ah, yes.
And I was curious if, John, you knew what we have here that we're about to talk about is much more robust than what comes up on the screen. Were they just trying to like summarize what that scene was?
I wrote all that for that DVD.
I thought I was talking about the right man.
I supplied all that material for the original DVD for the.
You know, I thought I might have been asking the right person.
And I forget what they did with it. I honestly, truly, I can't remember the details. I know I gave them essentially the unseen Twin Peaks material that we had. And then I forget if I edited it down or they edited it down or how they ended up with what was. But that's like you press a button and on your screen and you get text. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh.
There's only so much real estate.
Right. So it had to be edited down. There was a lot more material than they could put there. We offered to do audio commentary for them on but they didn't want to do it. So
wow. They want to spend the money, I guess. That would have been awesome. There's one of the dialogue here too that where Lucy asks, "What does the midget stand for?" And Cooper just says, "Just about everything."
That dream sequence was shot pretty much by accident because they needed to have an ending for the European market, and so they had this. And then so when they're making the series, they have this content and they're like, why should we throw it away? Let's incorporate it into the story, and what we'll do is we'll make it a dream. And so, you know, they do that. Cooper has the dream, and then they're basically sort of saddled with, now we have to make some sense out of that, which it never really had any sense to begin with. It was just sort of, and even Lynch has admitted that it was just sort of winging it. Then Frost attempts to assign some meaning to it, and you know, they kind of have to stretch things a bit and convolute things a bit in order so that dream will in fact inform the rest of the story. So they kind of have to bend over backwards here and there to do that. But that's exactly what's happening at this point. They're like, okay, now we have to crack the code to solve the crime. So the dream becomes a code, which it never was a code to begin with. It was just it was just random stuff.
Yeah.
I had in my notes here that break the code, solve the crime as being fairly significant in the fact that you all know that, there's debate and there's no right or wrong. But there's this debate of how to watch it. Some people watch with, a detective eye, meticulously going over every bit of, clue and piece, and that extends to even the third season. Whereas, others side towards the, this is almost like Lynch doing a painting come to life, and you're just kind of supposed to soak it in and, just kind of how it, makes you feel. But I thought that probably him giving that mantra, at least not once but twice, is really kind of what sent people down the Reddit, kind of whodunit type thread.
Got a lot of that going on.
You really know more than anybody about that, Sam.
I'm actually really surprised, even though we're this far out from season 3 now, just how many posts we still receive with like really well thought out, in-depth theories about sometimes just the most minute details, like the color of a certain object or the way somebody was positioned in a scene relative to someone else. It's kind of amazing. People are really intense.
Yeah. But, I feel like Lynch and Frost kind of led the audience to that. And they led it right in the pilot with James's bike being in the eye of Laura Palmer. I feel like right there and then they were saying, yeah, you should look at this show differently.
Interior, the Double R Diner. Day. Norma Jennings and parole officer Wilson Mooney occupy a booth in the back.
Hank's parole hearing is scheduled for Wednesday. Barring unforeseen circumstance, with your full support behind the board, he should be released shortly thereafter. Any questions?
No.
Comments?
No.
I'm sure Hank appreciates your unwavering devotion. Now I'll need to check some information. You and Hank have been married for...
Since high school.
There are no children?
I can't have any.
How would you characterize your current relationship?
What do you mean, Mr. Mooney?
Are you planning a divorce, Mrs. Jennings?
Not a divorce, no.
I was kind of surprised to see the line about how she wasn't able to have kids, because that's never brought up in the show anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's actually sort of depressing, especially given her relationship with Hank.
I thought it also spoke to her devotion to the double R. If she can't have children.
I agree, 100%. And
like
even the way she acts towards Shelly, I mean, in some ways, I think sometimes she feels like a mother.
It's like her family
Yeah.
at the Double R.
And even looking at season 3, the way that she cares so much about the original Double R. I mean, I think
pies.
Yeah,
and,
it's about love. It's about family. And
Interior, the Double R Diner. Day. A pale and wan Shelly Johnson, newly arrived, sets her purse beneath the cash register.
I didn't expect you till after the funeral.
I figured you could use some help.
Norma pauses, looks beneath the register. She can see Shelly's purse, slightly open, and she can see a brand new handgun inside it.
Shelly, what are you doing with the gun in your purse?
Nothing.
Nothing? Nobody does nothing with a gun.
I bought it. It's for protection. Peace of mind, anyway. You know, what happened to Laura?
You'd be better off hiring a lawyer.
I can't afford one.
Well, watch yourself. Understand?
Shelly nods, pouts. Norma cases up a little.
Careful you don't murder your makeup.
Norma grins, slips off toward hungry customers.
They scripted the scene that Norma sees that she has a gun, but I think they figured, and they may have shot it, but then they figured later it would be more dramatic if we see it, at the end.
Right.
Then there's more of a threat involved than that casual conversation between Shelly and Norma.
Better. And I don't really like some of the dialogue. Careful, don't murder your makeup. Yeah.
They can't be beauty queens if they murder their makeup.
You're getting ahead. We got weeks before we get to the Miss Twin Peaks.
Months.
Months. A month.
Exterior, Leo Johnson's house, day. Truman and Cooper pull up to the Johnson house, park the cruiser next to Leo's truck rig. They step out of the cruiser. Truman stops, deeply troubled about the morgue altercation.
I can't believe I decked him. It was out of line. It was unprofessional. It was probably illegal. Harry, there are many ways to handle an insult, but sometimes there's just no substitute for a stiff right hook. Tell me I'm not going to get my butt kicked by the Bureau. Albert's been hit before, and he'll be hit again. You'll get your butt kicked over my dead body. Look at that. There's a duck on the lake. Fill me in on Leo Johnson.
Oh yeah, man. I thought it was hilarious that one of Sheriff Truman's lines was that he thought punching Albert was, quote, probably illegal, unquote. Like, he's the sheriff.
Yeah, you should know more than anybody else.
This dialogue is kind of basically thrown in other places. There'll be a point where Albert is coming to Cooper saying, "Hey, I wanna press charges," and I feel like there's other places where this kind of brought up, so there was really no need for this part of the scene.
I still wish we would have seen him say probably illegal in the show.
He probably gets into fights all the time.
We've gone past the morgue scene, right?
Yeah.
Just rewatching it, I noticed it's almost like Doc's playing the part of Bones and Albert playing the part of Spock in the old Trek, where he's like, you heartless monster, you just want to, tear this guy open. I saw that dynamic, and then it's almost like Kirk coming in when Truman and Cooper come in.
I like that. And Albert is kind of like logically, you can dig a hole anytime you want and put the body in. I can't do this, next week. Now, John, you've interviewed Miguel Ferreira. Can you tell us what that was like?
Well, he was great. I loved talking with him, and he has some interesting comments about this particular morgue scene because and I guess the writers became aware of this as they went along, is that he would often try to find a dude to ad lib, not necessarily ad lib, but try to add something to the scene and expand it or do something with it. And so in this scene, he was not originally scripted to, pick up the drill and start turning it on and off and all that.
Oh, really?
I think I've got somewhere where he says, yeah, okay, what do you guys have here that I can play with? I saw this drill. It's going to make this sound, Cheryl. So he's, talking to Cheryl Lee, but don't worry, I'm not going to put it anywhere near you. And she was like, okay, I trust you. It's fine. Do whatever you have to do. So he was really kind of getting into it and having fun with what was there. And so I think the drill idea was entirely his.
Wow. Isn't that cool? And I think I read somewhere, I can't remember if it was in your article or somewhere else, that it was a lot for him to say at first. It was almost like a monologue that he had to do, and it was a lot to take in at the first time reading it all.
He talks about that, just sort of jumping out of this episode really quick. He had that long monologue in the second season premiere where he basically has to recap the entire first season for the audience and for the characters. Yeah. And he talked about how tough that was, and they, trying to get it all in one take.
What was he trying to do with that drill, by the way? Like,
question.
Right into the noggin.
Another scene that Leland's watching Invitation to Love. Emerald and Jade is on the show, and then Maddie arrives. And I do love the idea of the twin cousin.
We had a local theater that ran season 1 over 2 nights, and while they would have like interludes and like people getting settled. While they're getting settled, they had, I guess, like a bootleg of like all of the recorded Invitation to Love scenes. Because there were ones I hadn't seen before, and they were just playing those on a loop while people were getting their popcorn.
Oh, that's awesome. So cool.
You can find it on YouTube, the whole thing. So, I mean,
that's fine.
There's a story out there where it was thrown away, the raw footage of Invitation to Love, and somebody picked it up and saved it and put it on VHS, and now it's available on YouTube.
Well, they're a hero.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the interesting thing about the Invitation to Love, it seems like it's really minor. They did cut scenes from the original script that were scripted, for Invitation to Love. This particular scene with Maddie comes, but I think it was deliberate on Harley Payton's part. He had the scene where Leland and Maddie kind of embrace or greet each other, and there's a scene playing on the TV behind them where you hear one of the characters, I forget which one it is, Jade, who says, "Oh, Daddy, I was so afraid. I love you, Daddy," as you see Maddie and Leland together. And there was some thought at the time, way back then, that there was no Maddie, that was Laura anyway. That was Laura dressing up as Maddie, and she had faked her death, and that line was cut because it might have hinted too much at the idea of that potential plot line, that Laura was really disguising herself as Maddie. Madeline Ferguson is based on the Vertigo character, the Alfred Hitchcock film Vertigo, in which one of the characters, takes on an alias of a supposedly dead character. So, I mean, there was all that, intertextual possibility there. Are they referencing another work to give us a hint at what's really happening here?
Right. In Vertigo, I think one of them characters was blonde and the other one was brunette. And one of them is Maddie and stuff. So it's very similar. There's another scene, of course, Bobby and Major Briggs, where Major Briggs is talking about going to the funeral. It's a classic
That's a great scene. Yeah, that's still one of my favorite lines when he yells, "I'm going to turn it upside down." Like, I say that sometimes to people.
Afraid!
And I feel like I'm just starting to get the sense of Major Briggs being a more thoughtful, insightful person than just a army man in a suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really took a turn because I think it was in the pilot when Bobby was smoking a cigarette or something. He physically slaps Bobby in the face, and we never see him raise a finger to anyone else the rest of the time.
Yeah, everyone remembers the big speech in the diner, but I feel like this is the turn, that he's becoming a different character.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And then Albert gives his findings to Cooper and Harry. And this is another one where the dream becoming a reality about Laura getting tied up and sometimes my arms bend backwards.
Do you remember that X-Files episode with the clairvoyant? This is the one where, it tells Scully that, she's not going to die. Clyde Bruckman's final...
Oh, yes.
Remember, she's seeing all that. It's like fat stormtrooper, and she looks over and she sees like a gas tank that's like white and... and it's like all those thoughts keep coming back to her. It reminded me of that when he's like, bends back with both arms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Interior, Hayward House living room, day. Doc Hayward steps into the living room dressed for the funeral, save for the tie which hangs undone around his neck. Donna waits for him. She looks at his tie, manages a small smile.
Dad, you're hopeless.
Donna knots her father's tie. She does not speak. Her eyes are red from crying. Hayward takes a look at his daughter, consoles.
Wanna talk about it?
Oh, Dad, I can't believe they're burying Laura today. It's so final. I think, and it just doesn't make sense.
Death never does.
So what are we supposed to do?
I live with death and dying every day. There are times when it's merciful, almost a relief. But often it seems nothing but needless and cruel. It made me furious for many years, furious and helpless. As you go through life, you learn to accept it, because we have to, even when it hurts bad enough to break your heart.
My heart is breaking, and I don't know how to stop it.
Donna looks up at her father. Her eyes are bright with tears. Father and daughter embrace.
If he had given this speech and then we went to the funeral and the priest had given his speech about death, I think it would have been probably too much. But I think the scene probably could have worked if it was just like a moment with them, with her tying the tie and them getting ready for the funeral. I kind of would like that aspect.
Might have made a bit of it the missing pieces scene where he reads the poem. Like you really just get the sense of, what a thoughtful person Doc Hayward is.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's interesting. Harley Peyton seems to, throughout the full script, he seems to write stuff, and then it's stuff that he's kind of going to return to again. Like the gun comes up more than once. There's some other stuff like this that sort of comes up again at the funeral. And I think he says in interviews that this was one of the first things he ever wrote for TV. And I think he was sort of overwriting to some extent.
Yeah.
So he made sure he covered all the bases, and then when they got, I don't even know how much of it they filmed, but clearly he put it all in there, and then they realized we don't need to do it twice. We can do it one time. Who makes the point? Like the gun. Why do it twice?
Right,
and so
yeah.
this scene is sort of reflected again in the funeral.
Yeah.
For this being like the first, you said it's the first thing he ever wrote for TV, even though he was maybe overwriting a little bit, I am massively impressed.
It is. It's a great script. It's a great piece.
Like,
he got nominated for an Emmy. I think
exactly.
It's the only writing Emmy nomination that happened. So.
Yeah, it's great. So I do some amateur screenwriting, and I feel like it's taken me like 4 or 5 screenplays to really wrap my head around some of the fundamental elements that he was just like breezing through on a screenplay like this. It's pretty amazing.
Exterior, Black Lake Cemetery, day. Mourners step through the trellis into the cemetery proper. Doc Hayward escorts Donna onto the green grass. She pauses, sees Mike waiting for her nearby.
Hi.
To father. Just a sec. Donna steps away from her father. She walks to Mike. She looks at him, says nothing, an awkward beat. Then,
Hey, I'm sorry about the other night. I didn't mean anything.
reaches for her. She pulls away.
Hey, I said I was sorry.
I don't want to see you anymore, Mike. Please don't bother me again.
Mike watches, shell-shocked, as she walks away. Ed escorts Nadine through the cemetery. He sees Donna returning to her father.
Go on ahead, Nadine. I'll catch up.
Huh?
I promise. It'll be fine.
Nadine nods, reassured, moves off. Ed steps towards Donna, intercepts.
Hello, Donna.
Where's...
He's not coming. He wouldn't.
Why?
Ed can only shrug. Donna sees her father waiting. There's no time to talk. She's upset, tries to hide it, and walks on.
Ed!
Ed turns, finds Norma standing behind him. She's troubled.
Hi.
Not the best place to talk.
I know. Hank's parole hearing is tomorrow. He could be out next week. Maybe sooner.
Ed nods. He doesn't want to talk about it here. She sees Nadine standing nearby and realizes why.
Nadine looks nice.
Yeah, she's feeling good today.
There's sympathy in his voice, sadness too. Norma understands. Ed manages a smile and moves off.
Ben Horne escorts Leland and Sarah Palmer into the cemetery. Mourners stop and stare. Sarah squints into the sunlight, clutches Leland's hand, and Madeline Ferguson walks behind them wearing dark glasses. Ben spots Catherine nearby. He nods to Madeline, allows her to escort Leland and Sarah ahead. Ben remains, waits for Catherine to join him.
Taking care of the Palmers, are we?
It's the only decent thing to do.
Had to shut down the mill again. All that grief. Few more tragedies, it'll roll over and play dead.
See you at the funeral.
Ben and Catherine separate, poker-faced.
Exterior, Laura's gravesite, day.
Laura was bright, beautiful, charming. But most of all, she was, I think, impatient. Impatient for her life to begin, for the rest of the world to catch up with her many dreams and ambitions. If we appear to put those dreams to rest today, do not believe it. For those of us who loved her, those dreams will never die. They live on inside each of us.
In the script, there's a lot going on. There's like all these different side talk.
This gets back to exactly what I was just saying. I mean, Harley Payton, he obviously did a great job, but he's being very ambitious in this scene. He was trying to fit so much in between the characters and keep all of the various subplots and character interactions and dynamic alive in this scene. And I think it was just impractical when they actually got there to shoot to be able to take coverage of every single character, glancing at every other character and trying to convey all the intricate secret storylines of Twin Peaks all in this one meeting of the town at the funeral. It was very ambitious, and ultimately what they did is they discarded a lot of what Harley had written, and they focused on the sadness essentially of the funeral.
Yeah, I get a sense why, is it ultimately only ends up being the only scene where, the entire major cast is together. So it's kind of like, wow, get as many interactions in as you can.
Yeah, that's true. It is one of the rare times where you get almost the entire cast together.
Almost. Catherine's basically saying about how, we really want to shut down this mill and a few more tragedy and I'll roll over and play dead. And it seems like so inappropriate. You're at a funeral and you're like, oh, good, I hope there's more tragedy and they will destroy the mill. And it's just like, oh,
she's heartless.
Maybe because we see the actual show, and it's such a somber, such a sad moment, and it seems so inappropriate for Catherine to talk about her business.
It seems in character, though.
There were other instances of things like that, and everyone's kind of lost in their own stories, and a lot of that was just thrown away so that they were focused on the story of what was in front of them.
Yeah, I sort of wish we had seen all of this now that I think about it. Like, it would have probably detracted from the sad feeling of the funeral, but I think it would have really opened up like a whole bunch of weirdness with the town before we see everything else that happens in the season.
I kind of thought the same thing too, Sam.
Reverend Clarence, in the script, there's a little bit more of his speech. If we appear to put those dreams to rest today, do not believe it. For those of us who loved her, those dreams will never die. They live on inside each of us. And of course, Harry's talking about, about her actual dreams of wanting to be more and getting older. But I, of course, take it as, dreams, and the dreams are inside us. I think about you, John. That's not how Harley probably thinks, but I kind of think like, are we in this dream world, and are we all living Laura's dream? And
it's just another example of, the idea of dreams coming into the story. Someday I want to go track down every time the word dream is used in the entire narrative, because it constantly comes back. That idea constantly comes back, and it was here again.
I'll see you in my dream. A policeman's dream.
It's like I'm having the most beautiful dream.
Following a dream I had 3 years ago.
The idea for all this really came from a dream.
Isn't it too dreamy?
Harry, let me tell you about the dream I had last night. In my dream, Sarah Palmer has a vision of her daughter's killer. My dream is a code waiting to be broken. Do you know where dreams come from? The pictures become dreams, but...
So what was the end of this dream?
Suddenly it was 25 years later.
For the world to finally catch up to her dreams and ambitions.
Yeah, I just had a couple things to mention about the Reverend. First of all, I don't know if this is in the scripts or anything, but I saw it somewhere where his full name is Reverend Clarence Brocklehurst. That last name is just awesome, Brocklehurst. And another thing, like when he was giving his eulogy, he mentioned a couple times that, you know, how much he personally was going to miss Laura and that he loved her. And the first time I saw the scene, I thought he was just going to be yet another person in the long train of people who all had fallen for Laura. So, like, you know, we've got Jacoby, and we've got Ben Horn, and so on and so forth. And then the priest, you know? It was getting out of hand, man.
Exterior, the roadhouse. Night. A dusty parking lot surrounds the slightly seedy honky-tonk. Behind it, another smaller structure. The bookhouse. Sheriff Truman and the others arrive in a cruiser and a patrol car. Exit. Cooper takes a deep breath of cool night air.
This way.
Truman leads Cooper towards the bookhouse.
How long have you been sheriff, Harry?
5 years.
How long have you been meeting here?
Longer than that. It's a funny thing. Seems like every time you solve a mystery, there's another one right behind it.
Cooper smiles. He can appreciate that sort of thinking.
Truman mentions that he's been sheriff for 5 years. I actually would think he would have been sheriff forever. Like, he seems like he's just been doing the job.
Who was before him? Wasn't it mentioned at some point in one of Mark Frost's books that he put out? Wasn't it his dad? Like, it was like...
It was like a family thing.
Right.
Interior, Blue Pine Lodge kitchen, night. Lights are low. A small table has been set with silver, candles, and white linen. A romantic supper for two. Josie wears a silk robe, something sheer beneath it. Sheriff Truman wears an ardent expression of a man in love. Pete steps into view, carrying dinner on a large platter.
Pan-fried rainbow. Caught 'em this morning.
Pete serves the trout to each.
Thank you, Pete.
It's nothing. Old family recipe.
Truman pours a little wine, offers.
Pour you a glass, Pete?
No, you kids enjoy. Never mind the dishes. We'll get 'em later.
Heart of gold, old Pete.
Yes, he is.
Josie, what's wrong?
Nothing.
Nothing.
When Andrew died, I was so alone. I couldn't think. I didn't know what to do. Catherine said she would help me, and Ben would help me too.
Ben and Catherine.
They lied to me. They didn't care about Andrew. They didn't care about me. All they want is to take the mill away from me. I have never said this before to anyone. Harry, I believe Andrew's death was not an accident, and I believe they will try to kill me too.
Josie, nothing's gonna happen to you. Not now, not ever. I'll make damn sure of it.
Oh, Harry.
Truman kisses her gently. Josie sighs, returning his kiss with greater fervor. They settle into a long embrace, whisper between kisses.
You don't have to be afraid. Days like today, death feels like the biggest thing in the world. But it's not, Josie. Not for us.
I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of losing you.
A beat. Josie begins to recite while trembling in his arms.
All things, howsoever they flourish, return from the root from which they grew. This return to the root is called quietness. Quietness is called submission to fate. What is submitted to fate has become part of the always so. To know the always so is to be illumined. Not to know it means to go blindly to disaster. He who knows the always so has room in him for everything. He who has room in him for everything is without prejudice. To be without prejudice is to be kingly. To be kingly is to be of heaven. To be of heaven is to be in Tao. Tao is forever, and he that possesses it, though his body ceases, is not destroyed.
It's a poem that she recites from Tao Te Ching which is like a classic piece of Chinese literature from somewhere around the 4th century BC. It's like considered a fundamental Taoist text. I'm sort of glad they cut it because it's like kind of clunky and awkward. But it is kind of an interesting thing that she did.
I think it would have been out of character, ultimately. Of course, at this point, they didn't know.
Yeah.
It's just like with Truman being, sheriff for 5 years and some of this other stuff. They didn't have the backstory figured out, nor did they really know exactly where they might be going with everything. So Josie here is scripted as being kind of a stronger character and having a deeper bond with Truman. But we know, that she is duplicitous. I think this would have gone somewhat against that character. She wouldn't have been so honorable and upright, I guess, as they were maybe depicting her here. So taking it out, obviously allowed them to follow that other path.
That's a good point. And it seems like looking at the script, there was so many, like all of Twin Peaks seems to be reflecting on death. Like you have all these characters who are like, this is what I think about death. And
heavy-handed.
Maybe it is heavy-handed.
To have that many monologues about death.
Exterior, Black Lake Cemetery, night. Cooper stands at the cemetery, a night wind howling about him. He peers into the dark, Laura's grave in the distance. The land of the dead. A beat, then.
Can you hear him?
Cooper turns to find an old caretaker at his side, gazing out into the night.
It's the metal in the wood, I guess. Some caskets, you stick them in the ground, and the wood starts to expand, starts to rub against that metal. And if it rubs just so, you get a strange sort of sound. If the night's just right and the wood, teak and brass are the best. Well, it's like music. You can almost hear the caskets singing.
Needless to say, it's a notion Cooper finds fascinating.
Cooper and the caretaker just talks about, can you hear them? And he's like, almost like, can you hear the sounds? Cool. Can you hear the sounds? And the noises, the wood and the metal, and the caskets are singing.
I wish we would have seen this. This was like, of all of these unseen scenes, this was the most eerie and cool bits of dialogue from the entire thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Very.
I agree. I think if I could pick one of the scenes of this entire script that didn't make it, would be this one. I can just imagine how well done it could have been. Cooper at night in a cemetery and the caretaker. Who knows how they would have cast that caretaker character as well. Basically describing to Cooper that the caskets make sound, they sing, and we might even have had some odd sound effects or music or whatever to accompany that. It could have been an incredible scene. I imagine it was cut just simply for time.
Yeah, probably.
And in the script, it says Cooper finds this fascinating. So he see, to me, I take that as he takes joy out of this caretaker seeing the world this way.
Well, he puts his ear to the ground to listen to
Needless to say, it's a notion he finds fascinating.
Well, and the script describes him putting his ear to the ground to listen. So, it would have been... That would have been a great scene, too, to see Kyle MacLachlan as Cooper. I could just imagine, that boyish kind of enthusiastic, response he has to things. He just bend over and put his ear to the ground to see if he can hear the casket.
Oh, yeah. He's spotting ducks in this episode. He's definitely...
Those are all the unseen scenes.
I'd be remiss if we didn't mention, I think it's a Hall of Fame scene, which is Coop and Hawk sharing the beer at the end, which, John, I think you've gone back and referenced this multiple times when we're talking about the soul and what can happen with the soul. And
Yeah, a walking souls that give life to the mind and the body, a dream soul that wanders. And then Cooper says, where do they wander? And Hawk says, far away places.
Oh, it's so great, isn't it? Yeah. That really is.
It feels like it could definitely relate to season 3, though. I feel like we could definitely see wandering souls, and we're going to faraway places. Is the last place that Cooper and Laura Carrie. Cooper, Laura, Carrie, Cooper and Carrie, Laura,
Richard.
They seem like they've gone away to faraway places. It's not Twin Peaks as we know it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that fits very well. Yeah, the whole idea of perhaps a wandering soul.
For every one of these community rewatch, I always like to say, are there clues that Leland was the killer?
Well,
and we kind of talked about it with Leland falling on the casket. I mean, is that some kind of I mean, it could almost imply that he has a sexual relationship with her.
See, when I first saw, I
not when I first saw, but looking back,
I guess, yeah, it's kind of weird.
And then not only that, but Sarah then says, what does she say?
She has a great line.
She has a great line.
She says, Leland, you have to ruin this too.
Yeah.
Ruin this too.
Yeah. What else has he ruined?
I think there are potentially clues here. I mean, I don't think they knew. Certainly Harley didn't know that Leland was going to be the killer, but they really did give us some good information here that in retrospect fits perfectly with the story.
And one other one is that, we were just talking about Cooper and Hawk, and then you have Leland on the dance floor. And so it's like at the same time they're talking about the spirits. Leland is possessed by a spirit, and we have him dancing. And I actually feel like he kind of crouches down a little bit like a midget in some ways. I don't know. It's just the way he kind of like crawls up into a ball a little bit. It makes me think of that first time we see the little man from another place where he's shaking and then he kind of turns around. So I don't know. To me, that's almost like it could be, and that's what I mean. That they cheat, and that's what they say in season 2. Is Leland danced compulsively and stuff,
like the little man.
Like the little man, yeah.
This might be a good time to mention, in the long tradition of taking a friend or loved one through the show, I have my mom going through it, and she just watched the season 2 opener, and as far as I said, any ideas on who done it? She was like, "Am I supposed to?" And then the other thing was that in the text she said, "Wow, that Leland guy's a weirdo, huh?"
Oh, that's awesome.
I think I'm getting a lot of text messages when that episode happens.
Oh, I can't wait. You got to tell everybody about it.
Yeah. You should be documenting this.
You should be on Reddit, Andy, and document Andy's mom watches Twin Peaks.
I thought about sitting her down with this microphone, just asking her questions.
Oh,
people have done that. The people who did the original Twin Peaks podcast, recorded, I think their parents or something, watching either Lonely Souls or maybe Firewalk with Me. I can't remember which, but their parents didn't know that they were being recorded.
That's awesome.
Oh man.
Yeah. So my mom hates Twin Peaks. I don't even know if she's ever. I don't know if she's ever seen a whole show. Maybe she's seen one, but she thinks it's she's Christian and she thinks it's like the devil's show or something like that. To this, right now, she will not allow. She does not want me to mention the word Twin Peaks. So I'm now an adult. I have a Twin Peaks podcast. I have a podcast, a weekly podcast, and she does not want me to ever mention the word Twin Peaks. But at the same time, she didn't say I couldn't watch Twin Peaks. It's kind of funny. She hated it, but she kind of knew I loved it and was obsessed.
It was on ABC. What could be wrong?
Yeah, I'm sure.
The Disney Channel, right?
It wasn't Disney then.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't Disney then.
Do we look at episode 3A differently now that we've seen season 3?
In certain ways, I had not watched really any of the original 2 seasons since watching season 3. I guess there weren't specific things I picked up on in terms of clues and who done it and stuff like that, but it was more of watching all of the characters in this episode who ended up returning for season 3, which was a huge chunk of them. Knowing where all of them end up so many years later, it was kind of like reviewing the contents of a time capsule or something. Lives lived and memories remembered. That's that whole bit. We see interactions between Ed and Norma, the way Jacoby is now versus the way he is later.
Yeah.
Even Sheriff Truman, even though his parts were played out off screen in the new season, we still get to find out what happened to him. It was kind of mind blowing to me to be going back in time and seeing all these people so much younger and knowing what happened to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that, we're back with the Cooper, Hawk, and then Leland, and, Leland's so upset, and Cooper comes over, and Hawk goes over to him to help him, and Cooper says, "Let's take you home," and Leland says, "Home." And of course, that makes me think of season 3 again. It's Cooper's taking you home, and there is home is brought up many times. The home is,
but it's in your home, and Cooper's essentially bringing the murderer back home to kill again.
So it's Cooper's fault.
It's Cooper's fault.
The pod you had a couple episodes back, the Someone Is in My House art book, Kristen mentioned how much the home focuses on his artwork.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's so true. You look at that, his work, and it's...
Yeah, the snowmen and the homes, and it was the weird... His thoughts were, what's behind those walls? What's the dark secret of, a suburban, neighborhood? It's kind of creepy.
I do have just a short behind-the-scenes piece of information.
Yeah.
We interviewed Grace Zabriskie, about all of what she'd done on Twin Peaks, but she mentioned this episode in particular, and she talks about how when they were doing the cemetery scene, she's being escorted through the cemetery to the funeral. She says, I remember being hit with absolute certainty that in all her vulnerable grief, Sarah would still be trying to smoke a cigarette.
Mm.
And she really wanted to do that. Tina Rathborn, who was the director, said that's a bit too much. And Grace Zabriskie said, I think to myself, 50 or 60 more of a bit much is, and that's what happened to the series. And so she's basically implying that it was right there that they were taking maybe the conservative approach instead of the more eccentric approach. You can imagine if Lynch had been directing it.
Oh yeah,
and she had said, Sarah should be smoking, and Lynch would have had a pile of cigarette butts at her foot, and focused on it for a while. Anyway, it's just a small story. It's an interesting story. There's lots of places you can point to as the series kind of shifted direction and became maybe a little more networky, a little more palatable. Certainly far, far away from what happens later in the second season, but that's just one.
I have a special request for the Twin Peaks Unwrapped boys here.
Oh yeah.
So once you get to that portion of season 2 that he just mentioned, I will do every episode with you because I'm one of those weird people who loves that whole portion of the show because of how strange everything is about that whole part. I'm just like, yeah. It's
what episode? What part is this now? What did I miss?
Flannel Cooper.
Oh yeah, like Evelyn Marsh, Flannel Cooper.
Oh, you're for that? I'm writing down.
that
Wow. If
man,
Brian had his way, we
pleasure.
would skip those episodes.
I know. I told Ben, we could skip those.
No, how about do one episode just kind of like encapsulating that batch, and I'll be there with you.
We are doing every episode. I don't listen to Brian.
Oh, okay.
We're doing
we're doing them all. We're going for the full thing.
I got to jump in here. This just occurred to me. You guys were talking about that new Lynch art book that just came out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just bought it too, and I was looking through it, and I totally forgot this, but this all connects. If you look at the filmography in the back of that book, where it lists, everything that Lynch did, from Six Men Getting Sick all the way. When you get to the Twin Peaks section, the Twin Peaks of 1990 and 1991, it says Twin Peaks 17 episodes.
Yeah.
And then it continues on. And if you look at Twin Peaks: The Return, it lists 18, hour parts. And really? I looked at that, and it struck me. It really did, because I don't think it was necessarily a mistake. And I wonder if Lynch said, I am not going to want to take credit for more than 17 episodes. And I don't know if it was, out of just like, I don't deserve credit, or whether or not it was, I reject a certain number of episodes. And so for me, only 17 episodes are legitimate, quote unquote. Again, I'm reading a lot into it, and I don't want to make any implication that it went one way or another, but it really, really struck me that he listed just 17 episodes there. I tried to figure out how you get to 17 episodes.
Right.
So I wrote, let's say all the way through Bob Kills Maddie, which Lynch directed. So I think that's I think that's 14 episodes. And then if you take the last episode that he directed, the last hour, I consider it a separate individual episode.
Right.
That's 15. So I thought, maybe all the way through the part where Leland is revealed to be and dies, maybe that. I can't. I'd have to go back and count them up. I'm trying to figure out how you get to the 17 episodes.
No, I think you're right. If you get to 16, where you figure out who killed. That Leland is revealed, and then you get the last episode. That's 17. Right?
Yeah, because it kind of feels like an end to all that.
Well, I have, and then of course there's a 2-hour season 2 premiere. I got to add it up. I don't know.
Oh, right.
But the reason why I bring it up is you're talking about, Sam's talking about really liking that section of season 2, which some people like more than others. Lynch has said in the past that he thought season 2 really got off track, and I wonder if this is such a minor thing, maybe, but this is the kind of thing I go after.
You're on the right show to do this.
Whether or not that's, again, the 17 episodes something is a mystery, and I would love for that mystery to be resolved someday, to understand what Lynch is thinking there. I don't think it's just a mistake. I think it's deliberate.
And numbers are important.
Anyway,
I have opinions about this as well. So I think you're onto something with the count that you had with the 17 episodes. And I think my feeling would be that he is intentionally leaving out all these other episodes.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that is because shortly before the new season came out in 2017, he did a piece for like Vanity Fair, or at least they covered him. And they were taking bits out of an interview where someone was asking him like, well, hey, Twin Peaks now, how do you feel about it then? And he basically said something to the effect of season 2 sucked. And I know he's probably generalizing because season 2 is huge, but I think he's probably implying these other 13-ish episodes that he's not counting in the end of his book. This kind of, for me, paints Lynch in a negative light, and I'll explain what I mean by that. You know, we all know ABC meddled. He had to reveal the murder earlier than he wanted, and then things got a little out of hand. But according to interviews with other people like Evelyn Marsh, or really, I guess, Annette McCarthy, who played Evelyn Marsh, and some other smaller cast members who appeared in mid-season 2, Lynch was still around. He was approving casting. Of course, he was acting as Gordon Cole. He, I guess, had a general level of awareness, at the very least, of what was happening in the show. Now, if I'm Lynch and I'm upset at ABC for doing what they did, and I'm still maintaining a certain level of involvement, but I'm not involving myself enough to fix things that I'm watching that I think are wrong, and then 25 years later the show comes back and I talk shit about a bunch of people that were still making the series but I wasn't really helping with for whatever reason, I think that's kind of poor form, and it doesn't really sit very well with me.
I definitely think there's some truth to what you're saying. I think, I mean, there's no question that Lynch is involved in the later half of the second season because he does return as Gordon Cole, so he's on the set. And I mean, if you have David Lynch on the set, clearly he's going to be an influence on the story. I think if you look at it, you can see the quality of the show improve when Lynch is with certainty a presence. So the question is, where was it that he was less involved? And I'm not trying to excuse him or anything, because I think you're making a good point. But I do believe there is a section of season 2 where Lynch is really, really hands off, and so is Mark Frost. People forget that Mark Frost was gone too.
Yes.
So it's up to Harley, and I have great sympathy for Harley, and I think Harley Payton's a great guy. But he was trying to basically manage a circus by himself. It was just impossible, and he was getting notes from Lynch that were, you know, contrary to what he was physically able to do with the show. But there was a section of the series where Lynch was really removed, and I don't know if that was in the scripting and it went down a path that he just didn't really even know anything about. So again, without excusing him, I think he just sort of skips over that section. We may never know for sure.
Well, that's fine. He can not like it. That's totally okay with me. It's really the negativity he's still casting towards something that happened, you know, a quarter century ago. I don't know. I just feel like at least in any profession I would ever get involved in, I feel like it'd just be a bad idea to talk bad about your peers, even if they did a terrible job.
Well, you know what? Lynch remembers things. Again, there's not excuse, but Lynch remembers things the way he wants to remember things. And he remembers, I truly believe this, he remembers the pilot, and he remembers Fire Walk with Me, and he remembers season 3.
Yeah.
Because those were all films or productions that were shot on location.
Does that influence the way you guys feel about that particular section of season? Like, does it invalidate it, or does it not matter to you, or, you know, whatever? What are your thoughts?
For me, I mean, I've said this to Harley. There's things I enjoyed about every single episode, and I feel like there's nuggets of enjoyment for each thing. I can separate myself from the people making the show to enjoying what I do like about the show. I guess I feel like I can separate that.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody working on this is perfect.
For me, like I, you know, as much as I kind of groan about some of them, I think like Ben's right. There's something good in all of them. I think and all the characters are it's quirky, it's fun. You just don't take it too seriously, and I think it's all canon. It's all part of the story, but it's side stories. I think the main mission's over, and now we're just focusing on these little loose ends until they bring us all back together near the end there.
I know on one of the DVDs, Mark Frost talks about he wishes he had Wyndham Earl had come into it quicker, and he wishes maybe he had got at least the Cooper storyline going quicker and stuff. Yeah, but
that's what I was going to mention. I mean, they're put behind the eight ball. They're without a main thrust. They've lost principal actors, and we've seen. I think we've all seen probably a lot of episodes that have gone beyond 2 seasons, but have had a sophomore slump, and that's a big what if. What if they gave him another season, and Lynch kind of went, all right, I didn't like what we did here, but I'm back. I'm gonna return to my show. And you wonder, could it have, climbed back up again as they started to get more ideas about an overall direction?
Yeah. I think about like the model they do now for television. They did 7-8 episodes for the first season of Twin Peaks, and if they had done the same thing, 8 episodes, it would have gone to 16, and it would have been the reveal of the killer and catching the killer or whatever. And then you could have waited and done a 3rd season, and they would have been fresh eyes, and it would have. If they could have gone that model, I wonder if Lynch and Frost would have been able to work things out better.
Yeah,
where they would have
flexibility these days.
Yeah. I think that the plan for season 2 was 3 major plot lines. The first would have been the resolution of the Laura Palmer storyline. That would have been the first third. The second third was supposed to be the Cooper-Audrey romance, which was going to be the major storyline that would go through. And then Wyndham Earl was going to come in and dominate the last third and, of course, put Audrey in peril. Because of lots of reasons, the Audrey Cooper romance fell through. All the B stories had to be elevated and sustain the story between Laura Palmer and Wyndham Earl. So you get this slump, and you get things like the Civil War storyline and the Little Nicky storyline, which got too much screen time. They should have been the comedic behind, simmering, backstory while we focused on Cooper, Audrey, and the drama there. Poor Harley Peyton. I mean, honestly, he had to maintain this hit show with 40 different characters at speaking parts, and all of them need to be addressed. They all had to have something to do, and it was just almost an impossible task. And so I would certainly agree if Lynch is critiquing that he didn't understand the dynamic that was there, because no one, Lynch could not have sustained 22 episodes of season 2 if the entire plot line of one of the main stories was scrapped, and they just had to go with scraps essentially.
Yeah. So wrapping up episode 3, do we have any final thoughts at all about this episode?
One last scene, just the when we're recruiting to the Bookhouse Boys, the Truman speech of the evil in the woods, and that it seems to hint that it's some sort of Faustian bargain that we get our nice Twin Peaks, but there is a price, and it's whatever's kind of out there,
Yeah.
That would have been a great direction to go. That's open for so many possibilities. I never had thought about that before. I like it.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
I wish that season 3 we had gotten the Bookhouse Boys. I wonder if they still are around.
Yep. Fighting evil in the woods.
Hey, men before us, men that come after, More when we're gone, I think is what he says.
And in this episode, we see Bernard Renault, who's Jacques' brother, and they're interrogating him about selling drugs. Rewatching this, I didn't realize Bernard was the janitor at the Roadhouse, and all I could think of is so did Bernard actually sweep the floors?
Sure he did.
Yeah, sure he did. We would watch Bernard just sweep for 10 minutes.
Green onions.
Well, thank you guys so much for being on the show. I'd like to start with you, John, and then Sam, and then Andy. John, can you tell us how we can follow you?
You can find me on Twitter. That's really the main place, and it's at ThorneWhip, ThorneWip. And then, of course, you can find me through Blue Rose Mag as well.
And it was just recent. It wasn't that long ago that issue 9 came out, which is so awesome. And another great magazine. You've got a great article about a strong sender in there, and I cannot believe you got Harry Gomez to interview there. It's a great issue.
Thanks. Yeah, that was the first interview that Harry Gomez has done that was exclusively about Twin Peaks. And I'll just share the story with you that he said no to us when we approached him, and he said he wasn't going to do the interview. And Scott Ryan, to his credit, convinced him in about 30 seconds to do it.
Oh my gosh!
And he said, "Okay, I'll do it." For me, that was just that was kind of a dream come true, because some of these actors I had always wanted to talk to, or interview, or just even meet. He was one of those reclusive, hard to find guys, and we got him. So we're real happy about that.
Well, congratulations! It's a great interview, and I definitely recommend everybody pick up issue 9. And Sam, how can we follow you?
Well, you can find me on the Reddit, of course. Our webpage is at it's www.reddit.com/r, that's the letter R, /Twin Peaks. My username is ISWITT, Iswit. We also are on Twitter at Twin Peaks Reddit.
Nice.
And Andy?
Well, I'm on Twitter as well, abuddah, ABUDDAH. I am also a host on a pop culture collecting type show podcast called the Repacked Podcast. Just putting those in any of your podcast applications should do it. And I just wanted to touch on our Miss Audrey Horne herself. Sherilyn Fenn had a horrible fire, and she's got a GoFundMe going. If it's still going when you hear this, just find Sherilyn on Twitter, and she'll have the link to her GoFundMe.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Scene 40, take 1, marker.
Okay, and music!
Strangers in the night. Action.
Did you know her, Hawk?
Flora? Caught her speeding a couple of times and let her talk me out of the ticket. It wasn't hard.
Laura Palmer didn't have to die. It's wrong. It makes me mad.
Everything dies.
Do you believe in the soul?
Several.
More than one?
Blackfeet legend. Waking souls that give life to the mind and the body. A dream soul that wanders.
Dream souls. Where do they wander?
Far away places. Anywhere USA. The land of the dead.
Is that where Laura is?
Laura's in the ground, Agent Cooper. That's the only thing I'm sure of.
To Laura, Godspeed.